Today, we're talking about what's new in Xcode 13. We got some great improvements to code completion. Vim is now in Xcode. We have column breakpoints, some new additions to storyboards, remember those? And some nice design tweaks. And of course, we got Xcode Cloud and then the documentation compiler, or DocC for short. Now, Xcode Cloud and DocC are completely different beasts all on their own. So after I show you the day-to-day stuff, I'll give a brief overview on those two topics as well. Let's talk about some design tweaks first, because that's quick and easy. So the first thing you'll notice, and I'm a real big fan of this, is the folders and icons have a new look and feel. I like it. I think it's nice and clean. You may notice you don't have like the .swift file or .whatever file. You can bring that back if you want. I like the cleanliness of it. That's just me. But if you do want to bring back those file extensions, you go to Xcode, Preferences, in general, and then you'll see here file extensions, hide all or show all. Again, I'm going to keep mine hidden. I like the cleanness of it. You notice this top bar got a nice little addition too. You don't have to select your simulator or whatever right here. That is now moved over here, iPhone 12 Pro, right? This is where you can select that and then your schemes and all that stuff. And then there's no more long horizontal loading bar. You get the circular spinner. So some nice little design tweaks that, in my opinion, really clean it up. I'm a fan. Now let's talk about some of those auto-completion improvements I was talking about. And my favorite, that's what we're going to start off with, is the switch statement. So in most cases, your switch statement will automatically fill for you, right? We're getting a placeholder image here based on an image dimension, which can be, square or a banner. Well, I'm just going to retype this switch statement below so you can see it, right? So I type switch and then dimension, and you see in the autocomplete, there's a little curly brace version of it. Well, if I hit that one, it's going to automatically fill in all of my cases. So that's nice. What I used to do is I would type that out and then, I wouldn't type this and I would, wait for Xcode to yell at me, switch must be exhaustive. Then I would click this and then I would fix that and it would fill in. So I love this because it saves me like 2 to 3 seconds every time I type a switch statement. Big fan here. However, it doesn't, I don't know if this is a beta 1 issue, and that's a quick disclaimer I should say, is that I am in beta 1, so things may not be working perfectly, things may improve, things may get added, but we are in beta 1. The most common use case for me on a switch statement is switching off a result. Right, so you see here, we are batch saving records. We get back a result with a network call, right? You get success or failure, and then you act accordingly. Well, again, I don't know if this is beta 1, or I don't know if this is, not part of the functionality. But here, if I type switch and then result, I don't get that auto completion of the success and failure case. So just wanted to point that out. It seems to work great for your own enums that you've created that you want to switch off of. But for something like the result case, it's not quite working yet. Again, don't know if that's going to come in a future beta, but wanted to point that out. But overall, love this change. Another quality of life improvement is that Xcode will be able to recognize what frameworks you need to import and then import them automatically. So here in the DubDubGrub app, we're converting a CK asset from CloudKit to a UI image. Cool, but you see here, we return a UI image here. So we need UIKit in our extension, okay? But let's comment this out, pretend we don't have this, comment out the whole function. Cool, we don't have it. Now I'm going to retype that function here, and you'll see it pop in. Well, let me scroll down so you can see the imports. Func convert to, I'm going to say image. I'm just going to type this out real quick. Not the full signature here, UI image, and you can see when I have the UI image autocomplete, there's a little warning. This class is defined in UIKit. Choosing this completion will import the module. Great, that's what I want. So if I hit return for the completion, give me my curly braces, you'll notice UIKit got imported right away. And if we change this UI image to, text, of course, I'm just experimenting, right? Don't worry about the function signature making sense. But you see, if I click this text right here, the SwiftUI text is what I'm looking for. This struct is defined in SwiftUI. Choosing this completion will import the module. Great, that's what I want. And then now you see I have SwiftUI up at the top. I think this is great because I know many times I have tried to type something and I'm like, why don't I get the autocomplete? And it's like, oh, I forgot to import SwiftUI or import UIKit. And here, this does this for you. So big fan of that change. Next up, we have more auto-completion stuff with guardlet and iflet, right? When you're unwrapping optionals, a lot of times that will auto-complete now as well. So here's an example of a remote image loader. By the way, this is getting replaced by async image in SwiftUI. Super pumped about that. So all this code will be gone eventually, but we're using this example here, right? Where we make a network manager call to download the image. We get back an optional UI image. So before we use that UI image, right, we have to basically make sure we have it. So we unwrap the optional. Well, if I just comment out this line here, and you'll see when I type guard let, UI image, I get the autocomplete for the rest of it, right? Before that didn't happen, right? Hit return. Now I get the autocomplete for my guard statement. Now, similar to the switch statement examples I showed, if the example is simple like this, there's only one, works great. If it's a little more complex, it doesn't seem to be working that great. Again, I may be trying to do more than it's intended to do, or it could be a beta 1 thing, but I just wanted to point that out. And of course, you can have more complex guard let statements, but again, for the simple ones, it works great. And again, a welcome addition. And for the last of the auto-completion improvements, we have the singular version of for loops. So you see here, I pass in an array called moves. So if I do for move in moves, right, normally you have to type all that out. Well, it will recognize the singular version and auto-complete that for you, right? So if I did for move, right, you see for move in moves, there you go, it knows, and it completes my for loop. And I saw Paul Hudson playing around with this and thought it was pretty cool. It'll show something like for goose in geese, right? It'll recognize that goose is the singular version of geese. So in some cases, it is able to recognize that, and I thought that was pretty cool. Next, let's talk about column breakpoints, right? So we're used to the line breakpoint, right? You see, I just put it on 103. It will stop, before or after it runs this line, wherever you put it, right? But it's the whole line. Well, you'll notice, especially when you're using some higher order functions like compact map or map, or even combine, where you can like chain this stuff together. Well, just the line we're not going to be able to debug that because we want to be able to stop this, somewhere mid-chain. So to do that, right, let's say moves.compactMap, before I filter that, I want to make sure my moves.compactMap is what I'm expecting. And by the way, this is from my tic-tac-toe tutorial where I basically take all the moves, get rid of all the nils, and we're filtering, all the human players or all the computer players, which we're passing in here. So that's what's going on here. That way I can see what moves the human has made, check for the win conditions, all that stuff, just so you have some semblance of what's going on with this code. But let's talk about this column breakpoint. So if I right-click filter, go to show code actions, and then set column breakpoint. And then you see this little vertical breakpoint, right? I'll click off filter so you can see it. So now what's going to happen when I run my code, it's going to run this portion of the code and then break right here before it does the filter. So let's test that. And actually, so I have some moves in here. I'm going to turn the breakpoint off just by clicking it. And by the way, to delete it, you can just drag it off. Okay, we won't add the breakpoint now. Let's run the program. I'm gonna make some moves in my tic-tac-toe game, so some moves are in there, okay? Now the computer goes, I go, computer goes. Okay, we got moves. So go back to the Xcode. Now put the breakpoint on the filter. So right-click, show code actions, column breakpoint, there we go. And then back to the simulator here. We'll move this over. Now I'm going to make a move where I block circle right there. Okay, the breakpoint broke right there. So I have moves.compactMap. That has happened, but the filter hasn't happened yet. So say I had a bug and I wanted to check my moves.compactMap. So I can do PO moves.compactMap, $0, hit return. Here we go. So this prints out my moves here. So I can see before I filtered, right, I've gotten rid of all the nils. That's what compact map does, by the way. It gets rid of all the nils. So I'm left with just my moves, and you can see I have like human moves, human move, human move, computer move, computer move. So this is before I filter it. So again, column breakpoint stops a line if you have something chained. So you can break before something happens in the chain and then inspect, debug, do what you got to do. So column breakpoints, again, another very welcomed addition. All right, next we have some error cleanliness. All right, so let me get rid of that breakpoint. I don't know, let's break this, right? Let's get rid of a curly brace here. That's gonna send everything into a tizzy. Okay, look at all these errors. Now you see how these are all in your face? Sometimes you may want that, but this also applies to warnings as well. So if you don't want all this clutter, there's a way to minimize these. So if you go to Xcode, Preferences, and then you see issues, instead of show inline, hit show minimized, and you see they all minimized over to the right. Now you can still see them, right? You click on it, you can still see what the issue is. There you go. But it is just not so in your face. So this is obviously a personal preference thing. If you want your errors and warnings to be in your face, great, leave it, don't do anything. If you want them to be minimized, now you have the option, so that's cool. And again, Xcode, Preferences, instead of show minimized, show inline, and there you go. Next up, Vim is now in Xcode. I'll show you how to enable that. So Xcode, Preferences, Text Editing, it's a little buried, Editing, and then enable Vim key bindings. And then you'll notice on the bottom, you see kind of the little shortcuts you get down there to teach you how to use it. Now, if you're not familiar with Vim, Vim is like a completely different way to navigate via just keyboard keystrokes. Very steep learning curve. I tried it once a couple years ago, gave up very quickly. So I'm not a Vim user, but I know many developers swear by it and they say once you learn it, you can never go back. I'll take your word for it. But anyway, if you are a Vim person, that is how you enable it. Now you can use Vim in Xcode. A little bit of a warning from what I've seen on Twitter anyway, is that it's not 100% there, like maybe 90% of the functionality is there. And I don't know if that's just, again, beta 1, maybe it'll improve over the betas, or maybe this is something in every Xcode release, we'll see a release note that says Vim improvements, added this to Vim, because this is the initial launch of it, if you will. So again, if you're a Vim user, now you can use that in Xcode by, again, Xcode, preferences, text editing, enable Vim key bindings. I am going to turn those off because that is not for me. Now some quick updates to Swift UI previews. We got landscape mode in previews. You can tap this little button right there and you can see what your app looks like in landscape. And we did not account for landscape in the tic-tac-toe app, obviously, but that's a nice way to test it very quickly. And then you click this back, you can see it's going to keep rotating it to the right. See, now we're upside down, the notch is on the bottom. Click it 2 more times. There's probably a quicker way to do that, but that's what we're doing right now. And then lastly, on the right pane, you'll see we have access to the accessibility indicator right now. But you can see here, upgrade to macOS 12. I can't upgrade to macOS 12 on my main machine. I can't take that risk, but I will try to get a screenshot of this on the video so you can see it. But essentially, it's a nice way to inspect all of your elements to see what you have and what you're missing for accessibility reasons. So it's a nice quick look to get your act together in supporting accessibility on this. Moving on to these storyboard improvements. Remember those, right? First off, you see the nice little storyboard icon over there. Again, all the icons changed. It's pretty cool. Down here at the bottom in the canvas, you see we can get iPhone 11, and you can see we can go to the iPads, iPhones. We can switch back, iPhone 12 Pro. So nice little UI there to switch phones very quickly. And then we also have an accessibility pane here, right? Where we can click this and view dynamic type. Okay, so our storyboard doesn't quite have that, so let's change that real quick. Because again, this is my super beginner app. We're teaching them how to build an app. We're not even touching dynamic type and accessibility yet. This is the very first steps. So let's go to our rules here. Change the label here, right? We're hard coding the font. So let's change the text to, instead of system, let's do body. Should be all we need for right now. So get rid of this for the show. So basically what you're seeing here in the square, the rules, the value of each card represents, that is now body. So that will now support dynamic type. But what you can test now in the accessibility pane here, turn it on. Now, as I drag my dynamic type, watch the rules thing, right? So you can see extra large, XXL, XXL. Okay, obviously we're not supporting dynamic type very well. It completely messes up the whole screen. But you can quickly see how this works. Again, super extra small. What does your UI look like? And you can just drag the whole way. So that's really cool to test your storyboard apps for accessibility. And there's other accessibility things, right? Like bold text. There you go. Button shapes. I'll move this over here. You can see it has the underline on the button. On-off label, I don't think you can see the other ones. But anyway, you can just test your accessibility right in Storyboard. And a good one is the dynamic type, seeing that in real time. Very nice. Now let's talk about buttons on Storyboard, because buttons got completely revamped in a very good way, in my opinion, because I've written many a button subclass to try to get that default Apple look. Those can all go away now because they're built right into the new UI button API and button API in Swift. That's also built into Storyboard. So let's take this stop button. Let me get my right pane out here. So we'll click on the stop button and you can see on the right pane over here all this stuff. I'm going to actually make this look like a default button because before you had to change the background color right to the color you wanted. So let's get rid of that. And let's go up and make the text color default, right? I want this to look like just the default button. There we go. And real quick, you can see in code here on the UI button, I had to make the corner radius 8 to get the rounded corners, right? I had to do a lot to get that look. So back to the storyboard, there's a new property here in the inspector called style. And you see I can do plain, plain will look like that, gray. And you see you get that grayed out style, see on the button there. And then, okay, back to the button. This is the one I like, and I think I'm going to use in a lot of my apps, is this tinted one, right? So you get that tinted with the dark color. That's good for visually impaired people because sometimes two different colors don't contrast nicely, but this is guarantees your contrast ratio pretty much. So back to the button, and then you can do the classic Apple button, this is the button that I always kind of built myself, was this filled button. And then also you can see there's other things you can do. So of course that's the color, right? So foreground and background, you can change the colors. We'll make it green. So green and white, and then the foreground will make blue, just for, example purposes. And then now that's the filled, right? Now if I go to tinted, you can see we get the tinted green with the blue. So you can customize this a bit on your own. But the last thing I'm gonna show you is the corner style. Remember I said I had to do corner radius in code. Now we get basically small, medium, large corner radius. We'll do large corner radius. I'll zoom in here so you can really see that. So that's large corner radius. And then if I click on the button, capsule, again, this is another very common style that you used to have to write some code to get. Now you can just get that right away. So the point is here, UI button got a complete overhaul and it's built into Storyboard to where you can just, click some buttons over here on the right to get your button to look how you want. Now let's talk about Xcode Cloud. Well, first of all, Xcode Cloud does require a beta invite, which I don't have access to. But even if I did have access to it, it would be very hard to demonstrate because Xcode Cloud is very focused on teams. Things like continuous integration, continuous deployment. You can build and run tests up on Xcode Cloud on all kinds of various devices all at the same time. And then once they all pass, you can automatically push the test flight to go out to all your beta testers. So if you want to dive deeper into this, I'll put some links to the WWDC talks all about this. There's a few of them. But again, it's a very, very large edition geared towards teams. And finally, we have the documentation compiler, or docc for short. To put it simply, this is a way for you to nicely document your code, whether it's your app or a framework you're building that other developers are going to use, to interact just like Apple's code does. For example, here I am in my CloudKit manager, right? If I was like, hey, what's a CK query? And I option click on it and I get this little quick look, docc allows you to do this for your own code. And again, you can hit open in documentation and there you go. Your documentation would show up here as well. It also allows for articles and interactive tutorials similar to Apple's own SwiftUI tutorials to be built for your code base as well. So again, I'll link to the WWDC talks in the description, but this is another big addition because we've all been there, right? We've all tried to use a third-party framework. Documentation is not that great, so hopefully a lot of people adopt this and we can get rid of those struggles trying to deal with a third-party framework. So those are the highlights of what's new in Xcode 13. Of course, there's much, much more. Hope you enjoyed the video and we'll see you in the next one.